Listen carefully, because this is not just a story. This is a warning wrapped inside a tale. In the village of Ep, there lived a girl named Sod. She was not tall. She was not loud. She did not wear fine cloth or put shea butter on her skin to make it shine. She was quiet the way deep water is quiet, still on top, but powerful underneath. Every morning, Sod would wake before the sun, fetch water from the river, tend her grandmother's small garden, and walk to the market without saying a word to anyone. People in Ep had a name for her. They called her Empty Calabash. Beautiful shape, they said, but nothing inside. The women at the market would laugh when she passed. The children would whisper. Even the elders would shake their heads. But Sod never answered them. She only smiled. And that quiet smile was the thing that confused everyone the most. They did not know yet what was hiding behind it. The one who mocked Sod the loudest was a young man named Emeka. He was the son of Chief Okafor, the most powerful man in Ep. Emeka was tall and handsome and walked like the ground owed him something. He wore fine agbada and expensive sandals. Every girl in the village wanted to be seen near him. One afternoon at the market, Emeka saw Sod carrying a heavy basket of yams on her head. She was walking slowly but steadily, her eyes straight ahead. Emeka called out to his friends and pointed at her. "Look at this one," he said, laughing. "She carries yams like she carries her life, heavy and going nowhere." His friends burst into laughter. The market women turned to look. Some covered their mouths. Others did not bother hiding their smiles. Sod stopped walking. She turned and looked directly at Emeka. Not with anger. Not with tears. Just that same quiet smile. Then she turned and kept walking. Emeka felt something strange in his chest. But he laughed it away. Sod lived at the edge of the village with her grandmother, Mama Chioma. Mama Chioma was very old. Her back was bent like a question mark and her eyes were cloudy with age. But when she spoke, even the trees seemed to lean in to listen. The villagers thought Mama Chioma was just a harmless old woman who talked to herself and kept strange pots in her hut. They did not respect her. Children threw pebbles at her fence and ran away laughing. But Sod never left her grandmother's side. Every evening they would sit together outside the hut and Mama Chioma would whisper things into Soda's ear. What she whispered, nobody knew. But sometimes after those conversations, Sod would look at the sky for a long time without blinking. As if she was reading something written there. As if the clouds were sending her a message only she could understand. The villagers saw this and shook their heads. "Two mad people living together," they said. "What a useless house." Now let me tell you about the river. The river of Ep was called Oma. It was wide and strong and its water was so clean you could see the stones at the bottom. The whole village depended on Oma. Farmers used it to water their crops. Women washed clothes in it. Children swam in it on hot afternoons. The river was the heartbeat of Ep. But for the past 3 years, Sod had been going to the river every single morning before anyone else woke up. She would kneel by the bank, press both palms flat on the wet soil, and whisper something quietly. Then she would cup water in her hands, close her eyes, and pour it slowly back into the river. The fisherman who passed early in the morning had seen her do this many times. They thought she was strange. One man told the others, "That girl is performing rituals at the river. We should report her to the chief." But they never did. They just watched her from a distance and whispered. One hot morning, something changed. Sod went to the river as usual before sunrise. But when she arrived, she stopped at the bank and did not move for a long time. She looked at the water. The river was lower than she had ever seen it. The stones that used to be hidden were now showing like broken teeth. She pressed her palms to the soil and whispered urgently. But this time, the ground felt dry and cold beneath her hands. She stood up slowly and looked at the sky. Not a single cloud. The sun was burning white like a hot coal. Sod went home and sat beside her grandmother. Mama Chioma was awake, even though it was still early. She looked at Sod with her cloudy eyes and said one word. Soon. Sod nodded and said nothing. She went inside the hut and sat alone for a very long time. Outside, the birds were not singing. Even they seemed to know that something was coming. Something that would change everything in Ekp. 3 weeks later, the drought arrived. It did not come slowly. It came like a visitor who kicks the door open and walks straight in. The sun rose hotter every day. The sky turned white instead of blue. The river Oma began to shrink. First the edges dried up, leaving cracked brown mud. Then the middle grew shallow. Farmers walked to their fields and found the soil hard like stone. Their yams were shriveling underground. Their corn turned yellow and died before it could grow tall. Women who went to fetch water came back with barely enough to fill one bucket. People began to worry. They gathered under the big Iroko tree to talk. Perhaps we offended the rain god, one elder said. Perhaps we need to make a sacrifice. The chief called his wise men together. Everyone had an opinion. Everyone had a theory. But nobody had an answer. And Sod sat at the edge of her grandmother's garden, watering a single small plant with the last cup of water she had saved. The chief's wise man, a thin old man named Is, announced that the village must perform a rain ceremony. They would sacrifice a white goat at the river bank. They would beat the talking drum for 3 days and 3 nights. They would call on the ancestors to open the sky. The whole village agreed. They gathered everything they needed. The white goat was brought out, bleating softly. The drums began to sound in the evening and the sound filled every corner of Ep. People danced. People prayed. People poured palm wine into the dry ground. They did this for 3 full days. On the 4th morning, everyone woke up and looked at the sky with hopeful eyes. The sky was completely empty. Bright, hard, and merciless. Not a single drop of rain. Children cried. Women sat down in the dirt and held their heads in their hands. The chief was furious. He slammed his staff on the ground and demanded answers. The wise man looked at the ground and said nothing. Because he had nothing left to say. That was when the sickness started. Children in the village began to fall ill, one after another. Their stomachs swelled. Their eyes turned yellow. The village healer, a woman named Mama Dyke, ran from house to house with her herbs and roots. But nothing worked. The children needed water, clean water, and there was almost none left. The river Oma was now barely a stream. Mothers were walking 3 hours to the next village just to bring back a small pot of water. By the time they returned, the water was already warm and full of dust. 6 children were sick in 1 week. Then 8. Then 12. The compound of the chief became a place of fear. Even Emeka, who was always laughing and walking around proudly, was now helping carry his sick younger sister from room to room. His face had changed. The pride was gone. Something that looked like fear had taken its place. He had stopped making jokes. But Sod noticed something else. Nobody had come to ask her for help. Not yet. Mama Chioma called Sod inside one evening. She held Soda's hand in both of hers and looked up at her with those cloudy, knowing eyes. "My daughter," she said, her voice like dry leaves blowing. "The time is getting close. The village is suffering. Do you feel it?" Sod nodded. "I feel it, grandmother." "Then why do you wait?" Sod looked at the small flame of their oil lamp. "Because they have not yet learned what their words cost," she said quietly. Mama Chioma was silent for a moment. Then she squeezed Soda's hand tighter. "Do not wait too long, my daughter. Suffering is a good teacher, but a cruel one. There is a difference between teaching people a lesson and watching them drown." Sod looked at her grandmother for a long time. Then she bowed her head. "I will know when the right moment comes," she said. Mama Chioma let go of her hand and lay back on her mat. Outside, the wind moved through the dry trees and made a sound like a long, slow cry. The market women who used to laugh at Sod were now the most desperate. Their businesses had collapsed. Nobody was buying vegetables because there were none to sell. The river fish were gone. The yams were rotting in dry ground. Mama Ngozi, who was always the loudest at laughing at Sod, now sat in front of her empty stall with her chin in her hand. Her children had not eaten properly in 4 days. One afternoon, her youngest child tugged at her wrapper and said, "Mama, I am hungry." Mama Ngozi looked at her child and began to cry silently. She wiped her face quickly, not wanting anyone to see. But Sod saw. Sod was passing the market with a small bundle under her arm. She stopped, reached into her bundle, pulled out a small wrapped portion of boiled yam, and set it gently in front of the child without a single word. Then she continued walking. Mama Ngozi stared at the food, then at Sod's back. Her mouth opened. But no words came out. Words spread through air the way fire moves through dry grass. "Did you hear? That quiet girl, the empty calabash," she gave food to Mama Ngozi's child. People did not know what to do with that. Some said it was just luck she had food. Others said she must be hiding something. Where is she getting food when all our crops are dead? One man asked at the iroko tree. Another replied, "I passed her grandmother's garden last week. One small plant is still growing. Just one. But it was green and full of life." Everyone went quiet. A single green plant. In a drought that had killed everything else. The elders looked at each other. The chief's wise man, stroked his chin slowly. Someone suggested they go to Soda's house and check the garden. But the chief stopped them. "We do not go to a girl's house demanding things," he said, though his voice lacked its usual strength. Because in his chest, an uncomfortable thought was growing. What if they had been wrong about her all along? Emeka could not sleep. His little sister, Adis, was getting worse. Her breathing was thin and fast. The village healer had run out of herbs. His father, the chief, sat outside every night staring at the dry sky. Emeka walked the village alone in the dark, something he had never done before. He was used to walking in the daytime with people watching and admiring him. But now he moved in darkness like someone hiding. One night he found himself near Soda's small hut. A faint orange light came through the window. He stopped. Through the window, he could see Sod sitting on the floor, both hands pressed flat on the ground, her lips moving silently. Around her, the air seemed different, cooler, softer. Like the air near a river. Emeka stood completely still. His heart was beating in a way he had never felt before. He turned and walked home, but he could not stop thinking about what he had seen. The next morning, Emeka did something that shocked the entire village. He walked to Soda's gate alone, no friends, no servants, no final border. He wore plain clothes. He knocked quietly and waited. Sod opened it. She looked at him without surprise, as if she had been expecting him. Emeka opened his mouth and closed it again. He tried a second time. "My sister is very sick," he said. "I need help." Sod looked at him for a long moment, the same long moment she had given him at the market when he laughed at her with his friends. Emeka felt the weight of that moment and he looked down at his shoes. "Please," he added. It was the softest word he had ever said in his life. Sod stepped aside and opened the gate wider. "Come inside," she said simply. He followed her in. The single green plant in the garden caught his eye immediately. It was lush and full, impossibly alive in the middle of all that death. He stared at it. Sod did not explain. Inside the hut, Mama Chioma was lying on her mat. She looked at Emeka and laughed softly, a gentle laugh, not a mocking one. "So the chief's son has come," she said. "You look different without your pride." Emeka bowed respectfully. Mama Chioma studied him. Then she said, "Sit down. Sword will help your sister. But first, listen." Emeka sat cross-legged on the floor. "This village has always had protectors," Mama Chioma said. "People born with the knowledge to speak to water, to ask the rain to stay, to keep the earth soft. My mother was one. I was one. And now my granddaughter carries this gift. She has been protecting this river for 3 years. Every morning before you put on your fine clothes and went to laugh at her in the market, she was at that river keeping it alive for all of you." Emeka felt the ground shift beneath him. He did not move. He did not speak. He could only breathe and let those words settle slowly into him like rain into dry earth. Mama Chioma continued. "The drought did not come because the ancestors were angry," she said. "It came because the spirit of the river is tired. A river that is protected must also be honored. When people dishonor the one who protects it, the river feels it. The river knows." Emeka's voice was barely a whisper. "And Sword is the one who protects it." Mama Chioma nodded. "She has been asking the rain to wait. Not to leave, just to wait until the people were ready to receive it with a humble heart." Emeka stared at the floor. "So the drought is our fault?" He was not asking. He was holding a truth much heavier than he expected. Mama Chioma closed her eyes. Outside, hot wind moved through dry trees. Emeka thought about every time he had pointed at Sword and laughed. The market, the jokes, the nickname. Empty calabash. He put his face in his hands. He did not cry. But something broke quietly inside him, like a dry branch snapping in the dark. Sword came back into the hut carrying a small clay pot covered with dark cloth. She sat across from Emeka and placed it between them. "I need to know something first," she said. Emeka looked up. "What? Why did you come alone?" He blinked. "You could have sent a servant. You could have sent your father's messenger. But you came yourself. Alone. In plain clothes. Why?" Emeka thought carefully. "Because what I need from you cannot be sent for by someone else," he said. "And I think I owe you the respect of coming myself." Sword was quiet. Then she uncovered the pot. Inside was water, ordinary looking, but smelling like the river after rain. Clean and alive. "Give her this to drink before sunrise," Sword said. "All of it." Emeka took the pot with both hands, the way a person holds something they cannot afford to drop. "Thank you," he said. Sword nodded once. Then she looked at the floor, her way of saying, "You may go now." Emeka went home and gave the water to Addis before the sun rose. He sat beside her mat all night, watching. By morning, Addis opened her eyes fully for the first time in days. Her breathing was normal. Her skin was cool. She looked at Emeka and said, "Brother, I am hungry." Emeka laughed, the realest laugh of his life, because it came from relief, not pride. He ran to tell his father. The chief came in and took Addis' face in both hands, pressing his forehead to hers. Then he looked at Emeka. "How?" Emeka hesitated. Then he said, "Sword helped us." The chief stared. "The same Sword? The quiet girl?" Emeka nodded. "Father, there are things I need to tell you. Things about this village that we have all been blind to." The chief sat heavily on his stool. He was not a man who admitted ignorance easily. But the relief of his daughter's recovery had softened something in him. He folded his hands. "Speak," he said. Emeka told his father everything Mama Chioma had said. The chief listened without interrupting. The palace was quiet around them. When Emeka finished, the chief was silent for a long time. Then he said, "Why did we never know this?" Emeka looked at him. "Because we never asked, father. We saw a poor quiet girl and decided she had nothing to offer. We never looked closer." The chief stood and walked to the window. He could see the dry cracked ground of the village, the wilting trees, the empty paths where children used to play. He had been chief for 20 years, through floods, sickness, and battles with neighboring towns. But he had never felt as small as he did right now. He turned from the window. "We will go to her," he said. "Not with commands. Not with the authority of my title. We will go as people who are sorry." He straightened his cloth and looked at his son. "And we will ask." Word moved through Ek the way fire moves through dry grass, fast and unstoppable. The chief and his son were going to Soda's hut. Not to question her. To apologize. People did not believe it at first. The chief bowing to that girl? Impossible. But then they saw it. Chief Okafor, dressed in simple cloth, walking through the village with Emeka beside him and his elders behind him. No drums. No ceremony. Just walking. The market women came out and stared. Mama Ngozi pressed her hand to her chest. As the wise man walked with his head down. One by one, the villagers joined the procession until a long quiet line of people was moving toward the edge of the village. Children peeked from doorways. Old men shielded their eyes to watch. Nobody spoke. The only sound was footsteps on dry ground and wind moving through dead leaves. It was the most powerful silence Ep had ever known. Because it was the silence of people finally ready to listen. Sod was sitting outside her hut when they arrived. Mama Chioma was beside her. When Sod saw the crowd approaching, she did not stand up in excitement. She did not look surprised. She simply watched them come with that same still expression people had mistaken for emptiness for so long. The chief stopped at the gate. He removed his cap, the symbol of his authority, and held it in both hands. He spoke himself, without waiting for anyone else. "Sod," he said, his voice loud enough for all to hear. "I am the chief of this village. And I have come to tell you that I am sorry." The crowd went very quiet. A chief apologizing in public, something as rare as rain in a drought. He continued. "We called you empty. We laughed at you. We did not protect you when you deserved protection. We did not see you when you were standing right in front of us. But you were protecting us all along, and we were too proud and too blind to know it." Mama Ngozi stepped forward from the crowd. Tears ran freely down her face and she did not bother wiping them. "Sod," she said, "I am the one who laughed the loudest. I called you empty calabash. I let other women mock you and I joined in. But you still fed my child when she was hungry. You did not have to do that. I have been carrying the shame of it ever since." She knelt on the dry ground right there at the gate. One by one, others knelt beside her. Emeka was already on his knees. Then the elders. Then Is. Then the market women. Then the fishermen. Then the ordinary people of Ep, one after another, until the entire crowd was kneeling on the cracked brown earth before that small hut. Sod looked at all of them. Then she looked at Mama Chioma. Mama Chioma gave a small nod. Sod stood up slowly. She walked to the gate and opened it wide. She looked at the chief. "Come inside," she said. "All of you." They packed into the small compound, shoulder to shoulder. Sod walked to the center of the garden where the single green plant grew. She knelt and pressed both palms flat on the earth. Her lips began to move. The crowd watched in complete silence. Nobody breathed loudly. Nobody shifted. Something was happening in the air, a change so subtle you could only feel it, not see it. The temperature dropped. Just a little. The way it drops near water. Then a woman at the back pointed at the sky and made a small sound. Everyone looked up. At the horizon, a line of thick grey clouds was moving toward Ep. Slowly. Certainly. Like something that had been waiting for permission. The clouds were deep and heavy and full. A little girl whispered to her mother, "Is rain coming?" Her mother could not answer. Her throat was too tight. Mama Chioma watched the clouds from her chair and smiled the way someone smiles when they already knew something wonderful was about to happen. The first drop fell on Emeka's hand. He stared at it like he had never seen water before. Then another drop. Then the sky opened. Rain came down hard and warm and full, like the sky had been holding its breath for months and could finally exhale. People lifted their faces and let it fall on them. Women began to cry. Men who had not shown emotion in years pressed hands over their mouths. Children ran in circles screaming with joy. The cracked ground soaked up water greedily. From deep in the earth, the river Oma began to fill, a low rushing sound that grew louder every minute, like a heartbeat returning to life. Sod stood in the middle of it all, arms at her sides, face turned up to the rain, eyes closed. On her face was that quiet smile. But now nobody in Ep could call it empty. They finally understood. That smile had never been empty. It had always been full, too full for proud eyes to see. When the rain slowed to a gentle pour, the chief walked to Sod. "What can this village give you? What can I give you to begin making this right?" Sod opened her eyes and looked at him calmly. "3 things, she said. The chief nodded. "First," she said, "build a proper shelter for my grandmother. She has lived in that hut for 40 years protecting this village. She deserves a dry roof." "Consider it done," the chief said. "Second, no child in this village should ever be mocked for being quiet, or plain, or poor. Teach your children that what a person carries inside is more important than what they show." The chief bowed his head. "And third?" he asked. Sod looked at the crowd, all these people soaked in rain, their faces soft with shame and something new, something that had not been there before. "And third," she said, "remember this day. Not just today, but always. Remember what it cost you to see me." The chief placed his hand on his chest. "We will remember." And they did remember. The village of Ep was never the same. A strong new hut was built for Mama Chioma, solid walls, proper roof, a good garden. The chief declared a day every year called the Day of Quiet Water, when the whole village gathered at the river to give thanks. Emeka became a different man. Still the chief's son, but he walked closer to the ground. He became one of Soda's greatest defenders, first to speak whenever someone was dismissed or mocked. Mama Ngozi never called anyone empty again. And Sod. She stayed. She continued to rise before the sun, walk to the river, press her palms to the earth, and whisper her quiet prayers to the water. Only now, when villagers saw her there in the early light, they did not whisper or point. They bowed their heads. Because they knew what she was doing. She was keeping them alive. She had always been keeping them alive. They just had not been quiet enough to notice. Share.